West African leaders have threatened military action against Niger's junta after it took over power in a coup last week. The leaders gave the junta 7 days to reinstate President Mohamed Bazoum, who is being held captive at the moment. The junta has also, in another development, warned that they will resist any plan of aggression against Niger by regional or Western powers. That is what we'll be discussing right now, as we have a guest in the studio who will tell us if these regional blocs, I know that the AU, the EU, America, are threatening sanctions against Niger at the moment. There's a no-flight policy that would be imposed soon. But what influence can they have in a sovereign state? What does this military takeover mean for the rest of African countries? Well, in the studio to do justice to that is Victor Okeke. He's a lawyer, Center for Social Justice. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to Asa Morning, Barrister Victor.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. So she's reeled it out. There is a military hunter currently going on in Niger Republic. Yeah. Of course, there was an extraordinary meeting on Sunday where, various members and service heads from the Ecowas were part of that meeting. We also heard our President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's conversation or speech during that meeting, and then reiterating that democracy must survive in Nigeria, in Africa rather. And of course, Niger is like we share borders with them. So there's also that worry that, there could be ripple effects. But what I find most interesting, which I think this is the first time that Ecowas as an economic voice is coming out in support with the UN, in conjunction with the AU, in conjunction with the that's AU, UN, and other blocs, to come out and say we are going to ensure that democracy survives. Return President Bazoum back, and that's the only person we're recognizing. 7 days ultimatum. Is ECOWAS backing? And then should we expect a bite from them?
Personally, I feel ECOWAS used to back in the past and also bite. But the ECOWAS of today, I doubt. But in fairness to the new Nigerian president, who is also the
president,
the chairman of the ECOWAS, yes. So he has had experience fighting the military in the past. So we remember his scuffles with the General Sani Abacha regime and all that. But then I feel today's ECOWAS, they lack the moral standing to enforce democracy, because you notice that most of the African heads of states, most of the West African heads of states, the circumstances that brought them to power are anti-democracy. Yes. So something you want to preach for, you are not really delivering it to your people. The principles of democracy, which all of them are fighting. So it's not just about having leaders who are elected to be Democrats. It's about delivering the dividends of democracy. People feel that, yeah, there have been recurrent elections in Africa, in West Africa, but then are the dividends of democracy being delivered? So we have this kind of a democracy that looks like a facade. It's superficial. It's not ingrained in our system.
Yeah, but as superficial as it thinks, I still believe that a bad democracy is 100 times better than a coup.
Of course, I do.
Or a military hunter.
Yeah,
you understand? So
I
honestly believe that. And unfortunately, for many African countries, like you rightly pointed out, the coup is the next way they go when they feel that they're not getting the dividends of democracy. But we have so many African countries to cite: the Hutsi, the Tutsi, the North Sudan, South Sudan. There's so many African countries to cite where they've had military intervention, where they've had a coup secessionist, and it's not been successful. And then several years later, several decades later, it does more damage in the long run than a bad democracy will eventually do, or has done to Africa as a continent. So for me, I don't understand. But let's focus on the role now that AU is coming in, UN is getting involved, and then they're saying to the military people in Niger, the coup leader, of course, their bank accounts have been frozen.
Yeah.
The accounts for the states has been frozen. They're putting travel sanctions for the military men and or anybody that participates in their governance. And I think it's a voice that maybe Africa as a whole, as a continent, should have been doing to get support from other African. So there's a no-flight zone, no border transactions between, everywhere it's blocked. Is AU, are they doing the right things in as much as you felt they're not backing like they used to, maybe during the time of Ecowas and other, stronger points? But
you notice that we've had a series of military interventions in West Africa in recent times. You can think of Mali.
Yeah.
You can think of Burkina Faso in recent times. So it seems as if it's a script. So the military intervenes. There is a national broadcast saying who is now the new leader. Ecowas will back, AU will back, the whole world will back. What next? They will now send a delegation to go and meet with the military junta to negotiate for the release of the president who's been held captive. The president is released, he goes on exile. The new military regime announces plans to hold elections. Sanctions are they will now be reviewed. Diplomatic relations will now be initiated again, and the cycle goes that way. That's what has been happening. You can think of Burkina Faso. So the military, and most of the times they promise elections and it doesn't hold. So it's not just about issuing, like the first day right from earlier last week when I heard about this military coup building up, the first thing that came to my mind was Ecowas is just going to issue a statement saying we condemn. So, like I said earlier, we have a new president in Nigeria who is the chairman of Ecowas for now. We want to give him benefit of the doubt. Let's just see how things plays out. But based on precedents, nothing is going to happen. But we want to give them benefit of the doubt that they will do something different this time around.
Now, Nigerians are beginning to ask, is the concept of democracy really one that is indigenous to us? Is it an alien concept that would be difficult for us to accept? When you listen to Nigerians in Nigeria with our stable democracy, seemingly stable democracy, also comment on subject matters like this, when Sudan had their own, when Burkina Faso, and now Niger, there are 6 other African countries that are being that have been taken over by the military as we speak now. It's also giving sympathy to the military. So is it something Africa should do and tweak the kind of democracy that we have to be more indigenous to us? Okay,
so whatever form of governance any society, any state chooses to, I think the primary concepts are respect for individual rights, in separation of powers among the organs of government, and also provision of social amenities. These are the basic, like, okay, in governance, that is what they call the social contract theory. That okay, like humans, that before now that we were living like, we were living in caves, that we were brazen, we were crude in our ways of, so we were struggling for resources and killing one another. But then one of the times we now came together and agreed that we want to appoint this leader to manage our resources for our own collective good. That's what governance is all about. It doesn't necessarily need to be termed democracy, but governments needs to be made to work for the citizens. The government needs to feel the pulse of the citizens. Like you and I are eyewitnesses of the fact that in the last administration, there were heightened tensions. Nigerians were really suffering. And there has been this discontent with government. We've not really seen the government do the things we ordinarily wish for them to do for us. So sometimes when this coup happened, the citizens, not that they are looking forward to seeing something better with military administrators, but then they see the military intervention as a reprieve. Like, they've been going through a lot. This is just like a kind of a change in driver. We just need, like, yeah, the future is uncertain, but then let's go on with this uncertainty rather than the norm, which we already know, which has subjugated. I think that's just what happens. But then nobody advocates for military takeover of government because the downs are much more than what you can see in a democracy. Democracy, yeah, it does advocate for freedom of speech and respect for human rights. But with military regimes, you cannot call them to account because they were not really voted for. You cannot be staying on a television station like this and demanding things of them because they impose themselves for you and they've promised you things. So, but democracy still gives us the best avenue to hold periodic elections, hold our governments to account, and then demand things from them.
So how do you think we should be going? I mean, this 7-day ultimatum, and then they're threatening military action, with the support of AU, with the support of the international committees. And of course, if they don't restore the elected, duly democratically elected governor, which is Mohamed Bazoum, they're also saying they're not going to accept any resignation from him because we know that he can be forced or cajoled to make an announcement and say, okay, I've resigned. Let it just be that that's the route he's taken or the route he's taken. What would happen if after 7 days, unfortunately, right, nothing is resolved? Would it diminish the strength or the voice or the power that Ecowas has, especially when Russia is somewhere in the background, speaking, offering, negotiating?
That I do not know where you got that. I mean, I know that the approach. And then this is international, very interesting international politics playing out.
Yes.
I don't know about in the background supporting, but
I didn't say supporting. I said offering, talking.
Okay.
So we don't know what they're doing, but we know that Russia
I don't know about the offer too.
is somewhere in the background.
Who knows what we don't know?
So it was in the papers. You read it out this morning.
Yeah.
So what do you think ECOWAS should be looking at, especially when we know that Russia is reaching out to certain African countries, not just Niger Republic? We also know that, of course, with the grain crisis and everything going on, Russia is offering certain policies that may be beneficial to certain African countries, and then other countries are looking at it, and Niger is a French-speaking country. The international relationship with so many African countries and France itself is not at a good place right now. So that's why I'm calling France, I'm calling Russia. And then, of course, on one place we have ECOWAS, we have AU, and other international bodies, the UN, talking against the coup, which they should, rightly. What do you see this power play playing out?
Okay, first of all, domestically, Nigeria has a very big role to play in West Africa. So whichever direction they want to take in terms of resolving this crisis would naturally be spearheaded by Nigeria. But then I personally believe Nigeria has so much domestic problem to have enough power or resources to counter what's going on in Niger. Like, the Nigerian military is already overstretched. Like, so I've seen some data say that in nearly as much as 30 states, there are military actions. The Nigerian military has been deployed in such places. So imagine the Nigerian military overstretched to that extent that we are threatening to go to Niger and do a military action also. Then you can think of our own domestic problems. Just recently, I think it was during the weekend that they said they were looting warehouses in Adamawa State, and curfew had to be declared. These things are like a bomb, a ticking bomb. Like, Nigeria is like, Nigerians as citizens, we've had it to this place. People are tired. People are hungry. The cost of living crisis is real. So these are issues the new Nigerian president should be concerned about. International politics is fine. Niger is fine, but Niger shouldn't be our priority for now, for me.
Even as chairman of the ECOWAS?
Yes. There are about 15 countries in ECOWAS. Like, other people that have stable democracies, people that have less worries to cater should take the lead in it. Nigeria, the president should focus on. Why do you think President Trump, when he came to power one time, he said that America first? He saw that he said that he didn't want America to continue to be the police of the world. America was busy fighting wars across the world. But then, domestically, they were having their own issues. Unemployment was rising, their GDP was falling, and they were having other domestics. So Trump said that he was going to focus home. I think the current Nigerian president should focus home and be able to address.
Yeah, but isn't it worrisome, especially when we share? I don't even think there are border walls where one leg, your left leg can be in Niger,
You notice
and your right leg can be in Nigeria.
Niger is a landlocked country. Nigeria is not just Niger is not just a threat to only Nigeria. Niger has borders with Libya, Algeria, and many other West African countries. So they should also be concerned about it as well. Then going back to what you said earlier about the international dimension to it, Russia, I'm concerned. Why are Western democracies not interested in ensuring that governments, leaders in Africa, in West Africa, deliver dividends of democracy to their citizens?
Good question.
Why does the French, the Americans have military bases in Niger, but they're not concerned about the governments in Niger delivering the dividends of democracy? The West is just concerned about stability. They want Niger to be stable. They want a stable Africa. They want a stable West Africa. But they're not concerned about the interest of the people they are forcing to be stable. Like they say a hungry man is an angry man. You cannot keep me hungry. You cannot be flogging me and expecting me to keep quiet. So they are concerned about stability, but not concerned about the welfare of the citizens. So the Americans, the French, the Germans, all of them have interest in Niger because they want Niger to be quiet because this
here is a large
Sahel crisis. Yes,
there's a mineral they produce.
Yes, uranium or
something like that, and it's very important for
to
so
them.
Many,
so they're all concerned about their own interests. So they should also be interested in installing democracy there if they're really concerned about their economic and political interests. So yesterday, the French president was threatening that if anything should happen to French investments in Niger, that they would have to meet it out with similar force. So you see the kind of things that concern them. But then going forward, I would suggest it's not just about putting up military aid and security aid to African countries and ensuring stability. Also ensure that the leaders deliver on their mandate. Yes,
exactly.
We need.
But I like what you said. Yes, I like what you said about ensuring that there's human capital development, one that will reverberate and improve the dignity of life of every citizen. However, you also said that the international community seem more interested in stability. Like she just caught me, we're thinking alike. These are sovereign nations. We are quick to remind them that they are sovereign nations. What more influence would you have wanted the West? Like you said, the Germans, the EU that is beginning to talk about it, the Americans and all that. Okay. What more influence would you want in tackling these social amenities that should improve life?
You noticed in the news recently that Russia held an African summit with about 17 African leaders attended a summit in Moscow. So Russia is trying to cash in on the crisis that is happening in French West Africa. The Americans, the Germans, the French, they are aligned against the Russians.
Against Russia,
so Africa now is like a kind of pawn in the chessboard of the West. So the two polars, they are fighting for dominance and influence. So now we are the receiving end of it. In as much as they are fighting for their own parochial interests, we would also advocate that, like most of these leaders we have about 15 countries in West Africa. Just about 4 of them were colonized by the British.
The rest are
a majority
colonies.
Of them are so the French should also, most of them. You know the reason why the West African common currency has not seen the light of the day? The French central bank still mints the currency of these French-speaking West African countries. So the French, forget that what they have is pseudo-independence. Their foreign policy, their national policy, their economic policy, overtly, subtly, is being dictated by these Western powers. Most of the time, they influence who becomes presidents. So they should also influence these leaders. It might not be expressly, but just the way they also manipulate it to influence their own personal good, they should also influence these leaders. All we ask for is dividends of democracy. Democracy should be made to work for every citizen of Africa, every citizen of West Africa. That's all we ask from them. So when these things when people feel that democracy is working for them, you notice that when this coup happened, it's built up over days. perhaps the coup plotters, they were gauging the reaction of the citizens. They first of all held the president for days. People were speculating what's going to happen. And then there was wide jubilation on the streets. Later on, they said that the national party headquarters of the current president was set ablaze. So they were now seeing a kind of receptive notes from the citizens that they should go on. But imagine if the president, the current democratic government was actually pro-masses. They had this social contract with their citizens, and the citizens really loved them. The most natural thing would have been the citizens rising up against, because they are just a group of military leaders. They couldn't have influenced the opinion of the whole mass. So people rejoice, people welcome military takeovers, not because they really like it, but because
they feel that's the only option.
Way out of the mess they are into.
Let's talk about the economic implications, and then I'll read it out. Suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between Ecowas member states and Niger.
Okay.
Of course, the first thing you want to do is cripple people's finances. But I'm wondering, if ECOWAS is saying they're going to stop all financial, of course, economic community of West Africa, that's what ECOWAS represents. So if they're saying that they're going to stop all, financial transactions between commercial or financial transactions, how is that going to affect the people of Niger? Not just the coupists or the people who should have been elected who are being kidnapped or held at hostage, but the Nigerians. Is that what they call them, Nigerians?
Yes.
Yeah, the Nigerians. How is this economic sanctions going to affect their livelihood?
You remember that some of these coup leaders, they are not just people from the streets, they are intellectuals. Most of them have even gone for military trainings abroad. So they understand economics, they understand politics. They will start seeking new alliances. You remember the statement that was signed by ECOWAS a few days ago, yesterday, that was Sunday, right?
Yeah, Sunday, yeah.
It wasn't all the West African countries, ECOWAS members that signed it. The ones that are under military dictatorship did not sign the agreement. So Mali, Burkina Faso, they are neutral on it. So what's the next option for the new Nigerian government? They will start seeking alliances. In fact, they are already extending Russia is already extending an olive hand to them.
Yes.
So they will just find their way. Yeah, there will be momentary setbacks. They would, over time, this is not the first time we are seeing sanctions. Which country has been sanctioned as much as Russia? Like many assets were frozen, no flight zone. But then Russia has been seeking alliances with other friendly countries. This is what these guys are going to do too. So the sanctions are not going to solve it. The thing is that it's only going to pauperize the citizens. Right. But as for the leaders, they will always have their way out. So the ECOWAS should be more concerned about how to ensure that democracy works and not about sanctions. We will just wait to see whether if it will work. But then, based on experience, sanctions has never really worked. In fact, over time, people grow thick skin towards sanctions. Like, yeah, we are used to this. This is something we've seen before. So,
now we saw what happened in Libya. Would you say that there are conspiracy theories and speculations that when you see a military junta just as this, the coup is probably being sponsored by the international powers, and we are seeing that this particular military junta seems to be approaching Russia at the moment for support? Would you say there is a monkey's hand in this pot?
Yeah. Okay. So Russia has this mercenary group that they call it Wagner.
Wagner.
So they are popular. In fact, they are making inroads into the whole of Africa. They are advancing Russia's political interest. They are advancing Russia's diplomatic interest. Russia is seeking alliances with Africa because they have been pushed away by the rest of Europe. So the more when the coup happened, they said there were some people that were rejoicing with the Russian flag. We cannot explicitly say that Russia must have funded this coup, but then there is always an iota of truth in stereotypes. So we wouldn't want to say wholly that Russia is, but then since the leader of the Wagner group Prigozhin, he has already congratulated the coup plotters in Niger, then it's tilting towards that direction that there is a positive light towards Russia. And the Niger leaders, the new Niger leaders, they will likely go to Russia, except ECOWAS act fast and act now.
So when you say act fast and act now, what do you expect ECOWAS? ECOWAS is acting. They've given us a 7-day ultimatum, and then they're threatening to use military force, which I don't think will be in the best interest of ECOWAS. But that's just my own point of view. So when you say act now and act fast, apart from issuing this ultimatum, what should ECOWAS be doing? And in that same vein, do you think it's possible that, okay, the coup plotters might come back to the negotiating table and say, you know what, this is our demands, this is what we want. We have listened to the world or to the people who are speaking, and we say, okay, we're releasing or allowing Bazoum continue his presidency. Above the next election is going to be in the next 4 years or 3 years, whatever their electoral circle is. But these are the demands that we're asking for. Do you see that possibility happening when we're talking of what ECOWAS should be doing and what they should be doing fast?
Okay. In terms of what ECOWAS should be doing, there should be just like there should be a sustenance of the current momentum. It shouldn't just be, there shouldn't be breakaway based on interest. There should be a global alignment against these guys in Niger. Coup should be, like, there should be a stamp on deterring it from the continent, from West Africa. Coup plotters should be punished. In fact, we've been suggesting that there should be an international tribunal, a kind of court, where perpetrators of coup should be punished, because they don't advance democracy. They they advance their own. Like, if you listen to the reasons that the current guys gave, unlike in the past where they usually say there is a breakdown in law and order, there is economic hardship, they basically said that there is rising insecurity in the region, and this is
it's still rising.
Yes. So in Niger, and this is the same Niger that has found alliances in France, in US, in Germany, just to keep the region quiet. That's why they have those military bases. So there should be this international alignment in terms of punishing them. Okay. It should not just be about, like, because at the end of the day, you see that they will still find those who will support them, and they will find their way out of it. If these guys should stay in power for the next 3 months, some of those sanctions will be lifted, because the concern of the citizens will now take precedence over the sanctions that were placed on them. So we continue to advocate that there should be a wholesome agreement among all state parties to punish these guys and ensure that democracy is returned. And when the democracy eventually comes back, the people should find reason to believe in democracy. There should be local content to the democracy. Democracy should be made to work for the people of Nigeria, Niger, Africa, and West Africa as a whole.
Well, it's sad that, Africa I think Africa is only the country that I know for a fact that feels that, a coup is the way to go. And I like what you said, that the coup plotters should be. But I think it's something that we've swept over under the carpet for so long in Africa, that people just do coup, then it goes on for a year, 2 years. You've lost millions of livelihoods. The country remains worse than it should. Should this also be a conversation that should be on the table with ECOWAS leaders, where, of course, they've called the service chiefs, so they're making their military plans and what to do and what not to do next in terms of military intervention. ECOWAS, should we be having this conversation? Because I like what you said. Coup plotters should be jailed. Coup plotters should be, I think the word is executed. Should be executed. Executed.
Okay, execution could be more crude. I think in modern times
they prosecute.
Yes.
But why wouldn't you want to execute?
Oh my goodness.
There is a movement away from capital punishment.
I see the picture. I see Africa. And yes, it's sad that despite the resources that Africa has, Africa should not be a developing country. Africa should not be. But unfortunately, Africa has had terrible leaders across board. Sometimes
I get worried personally about the way our leaders in in the black continent. Okay, there is something that is happening currently in Haiti. There has been, since their president who was murdered, I think died or some years back, there has been widespread gang violence. In fact, the United Nations recently called for international collaboration to help stem the insecurity in Haiti. Just Kenya recently, Kenya is now taking leadership in Africa. Kenya volunteered to send their forces to
Kenya
Haiti.
Is doing well.
Yes. So
even economically, yes, Kenya is doing well.
What's, you know, they said that don't preach to me. Let me learn by your actions. Action speaks louder than words. West African leaders should lead by example. They should show that democracy is worth aspiring to. Imagine if the countries in West Africa, imagine if Nigeria is taking leadership in terms of civil governance, in terms of dividends of democracy, in terms of provision of social amenities. Imagine if Nigeria is taking leadership as should be, like it had done in the past.
Giant of Africa.
In West Africa. Like all these neighboring countries, they will be aspiring to be like Nigeria. But because Nigerians, we are so large and we are so popularized. So what example is there in, Nigeria has had democracy working since 1999. So what there is there for them to learn from? Honestly, the crisis in Niger could actually have some spillover effect in our own country, because if they are Nigerians, if they are displaced tomorrow, you see many of them on the streets of Abuja doing petty jobs, cobblers, tailors. They will tell you that they're from Niger. More and more of them will flock into Nigeria.
Right.
Should that be an insecurity concern?
Honestly,
because we have heard from our former service chiefs that when we have issues with Boko Haram in the north, and you know, so many of those people, and then the story is that no, these people are not Nigerians. We've had service chiefs, we've had military people, heads of agencies that should not be uttering things like that have come out to say, no, those people are not Nigerians. We know our borders are extremely porous. We haven't been able to curtail our borders. We haven't been able to stop the influx. We've had issues where we say there's some fractions of Al-Qaeda in Nigeria. We've had factions of where there's another one, ISWAP, in Nigeria. And these are from neighboring countries. So if we're looking at Niger, Joy mentioned during the course of the program, I think earlier on, we were doing the newspaper review where he said, was it Joy or our analyst, where he said a former president had said, he would go to Niger to rest if there's any...
I remember that.
You remember that?
Yeah.
But now he can't even go there, and Niger is just at the backyard. So should that also be another cause of concern for us in terms of security, where we know that Nigeria is struggling with insecurity, and then that's a part that should be declared a state of emergency, is translating to our food supply and every other thing that we do? Should our military chiefs, service heads, be addressing it?
Honestly, Niger is a concern to Nigeria, but then on a scale of priority, like I said earlier, we have so much domestic problem that Niger shouldn't take precedence over. So Niger is a concern, granted, but then we have so much at home to tackle. But if we're able to tackle our own domestic problems, we could set an example for all these other African countries. They could be learning from Nigeria.
How can we tackle insecurity with open porous borders?
That's what we are saying. If we have a leadership that works, the human capital development is here. If we have transparency, if we have accountability, the security challenges we have, you and I know that in recent times there has been lots of corruption around security finances.
Yes.
So it's in the news. It is common knowledge. If Nigeria should work, it will have a ripple effect around all our neighbors. We cannot just be good and the people around us be retrogressive. If Nigeria works, the whole of Africa will feel the pulse of it. I believe that.
Are you looking at me, Joy, to know whether I have it? Okay, but we have
run out of time.
Just a last statement before we let you go. So 7 days ultimatum, which should be by Sunday next week, we'll know whether Ecowas is going to back or bite. But what's your takeaway for our listeners, for our president, who is also the chairman of Ecowas, and what should they be doing in a nutshell to ensure that they nip this in the bud and also ensure that democracy continues to thrive in Africa?
Good governance. Each African leader must believe in the social contract. There should be citizen-driven transformation.
Yeah.
Like, even the leaders should see themselves as citizens for a common will. What is a common will? We want to advance ourselves. We want to be a prosperous nation. Each leader in Africa should ask himself, to what extent should I use the power and resources available to me to advance my own personal interests at the expense of the whole masses? That's actually at the root cause of all the problems we see in Africa. Parochial interests, selfish interests. People want to advance their own personal interests against the collective will, and that's not possible. You are just one, and Nigeria is over 2 million. And you want to enrich your family and send all of them abroad and let the country languish in poverty. There will always be an uprising. There will always be instability. And this applies to the whole of Africa. We should set an example in good governance.
Thank you so much, Barrister Victor Okeke. He is a lawyer from the Center of Social Justice. Many thanks for being our guest this morning.
Thank you very much.
Great.